Good afternoon, welcome to the boardroom where we're going to have our Finance Committee meeting this afternoon. Ms. McCluster, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Height?
Here.
Mr. Dudley?
Present.
Mr. Whittle?
Here.
Mr. Tucker?
Here. Thank you so much. Any items to be added to the agenda? If not, we will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as it is presented, sir. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Dudley, second by Mr. Height. We shall are there any discussion? Okay, we can go ahead and vote. Thank you so much. Motion carried unanimously. We move down to 5A, new business. On the budget update and discussion, I think Mr. Terrell is going to start us off.
Thank you. Let's have the presentation up, please. Okay, let's kick off this meeting with a budget overview. Okay, so the goal of this year's budget is to follow along with me please, provide the level of service that our citizens are expecting of us today and to plan for future growth, looking ahead at a tax rate that does adjust for the large increase in property values. Now, we're very sensitive to that. Staff reviewed all department requests, and we've made reductions to all the requests based on actual costs, not desired, no wish list, okay? We're not, just because there's a reassessment doesn't mean this is the time for things that don't make realistic sense for the community and the organization to take it forward. And we took that attitude to the budget and pared it down. Therefore, this budget is as lean as we can make it. You'll see from Ms. Vanderhyde that we're doing things. We want to do more this budget, but at the same time, it's not a justification to pack it up with wish lists and things like that. So it's a lean budget. You know, in our philosophy, every tax dollar has a higher standard. It must be justified as the cost. These aren't McDonald's dollars. These aren't corporate dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. People work hard for this money. We know that. We recognize it. We are thinking about every dollar needs to be justified. And we've gone through it as a staff and paired it. And at the same time, being respectful of the staff's needs and looking to the future. That's the balance that we're trying to find. Nobody wants more taxes, okay? This budget will be a balance between that understanding and what is expected of us to do, because we are here to do things in the community. We talked about litter a minute ago. We're here to do things. We're not bureaucrats. We're here to be doers and problem solvers. But both today, but also looking to the future, because you've got to look over the next 4 years till the next reassessment. Not just today, the needs today, but what's going to be here for 4 more years, because we must do things. That's what the citizens expect of us. All right. So, budget challenges. Okay, we've touched on this in the past. I just want to remind you as we approach this year's budget. We started this year's budget with a $2 million deficit, okay? And we must be able to operate and pay the bills as an ongoing organization. This is a business to some degree. We've got payroll, we've got equipment, we've got gas. This is a business in many ways. It's an ongoing organization with needs. We've got to pay the bills, and we started with a $2 million budget deficit. But the good news is we can cover it with the reassessment. okay? It's not bleak, it's that we can cover that. Costs have increased significantly over the last 6 years. Everybody's watching inflation, watching the Federal Reserve, watching housing prices, fuel. The costs have increased, but there has been no reassessment or tax increase to compensate in 6 years. So we're doing some catch-up here. Okay, so that is a challenge. The county, let's face the truth. The county faces new long-term multi-million-dollar capital projects with the jail, with the historic buildings that we're going to keep up. They're true treasures in this community. A future courthouse complex, among other things. We want to look at recreation infrastructure as well with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan we're working on. We need to plan for the long term. This budget needs to plan for the long term, not just the needs of today. It has to look forward to the next 4 years. Another challenge is the state contribution to schools was reduced by $900,000 due to the increase in the local composite index, which we are required to recover just to maintain the SOQ standard at even the minimum. And I know he asked for 6% more than the SOQ, but just to get us even, we're in that $900,000 hole. That's something we can't control. We talked to our legislators about that. But right now, that's something beyond our control. We can only control what we can. And this budget is to address these challenges and be forward-thinking, not just today, but over the next 4 years. Ms. Vanderheide. Any questions of me, madam? Okay.
We're going to have a review of our revenues, where we are today, and then we're going to move into our expenditures, and then we're going to talk a little bit about capital as well. So what I try to do before we get started every year on revenues, as far as revenues are concerned, how well did we budget last year? And on the screen, I have shared with you our major revenue sources. You don't have that in front of you, but they are real estate, personal property, mobile homes, machinery and tools, merchants capital, public service corps for real estate and personal property, and then our solid waste household fee, which does go into the solid waste enterprise fund. So based on what has come in so far, you compare that with last year to see at year end how much of your budget did you collect. So these are estimates that we used January figures to kind of project where we would be at year end. And you can see how all of those numbers pan out. We are projected to bring in $47.3 million over all of those categories. And based on our 24 budget, which was $46.065 million, it looks like that we will gain more money than what we budgeted revenue for, which is good news. Yes, we did start in the hole by $2 million. Hopefully, because of things like this, we will not actually have to take that money from your enterprise fund. Another item I wanted to point out, and I think I mentioned it at the budget meeting, we're already about $800,000 above our budget as far as interest earnings. Vincent Shorter has done a marvelous job of investing our money, and so we're in a good shape to end the year in a positive manner there. So between those two things, hopefully we can not have to rob Peter to pay Paul, per se. But that's where we are currently as far as our other items. So moving on just to look at 25 revenue projections, I don't have a lot to share with you this afternoon on those major tax categories. I will say that we should have figures definitely by month end. Typically, as far as machinery and tools, the deadline to even get those in from businesses is February 15th. We just had that deadline. So they'll be actively working, and I will be actively pushing them because, you know, if there's a delay there, there's a delay in getting their information back to them in order to get those bills out. Another thing we just got in the last week or so were the DMV values that have to be valued by J.D. Power. And so, of course, we don't have those figures either. But just for the sake of where would we be if we went based on historical data? So we went back and we looked at kind of 3 years' worth just to see, let's use that as a basis. It doesn't look like we're going to have to do much unless personal properties are way different than what we think based on history. Because, you know, history on personal property, our values were here, and then they went up, and then it went down. And, you know, that's not something like real estate that you can really get a handle on. From year to year, people get rid of cars, they buy new cars, used car values are higher. So they're the kind of things you got to look at. So, of course, we'll get more confirmed figures, but it looks like the only revenue we really have to pay attention to is what do we want to do with real estate. And I know Mr. Terrell, at the end of the presentation, he'll come back with, you know, some rate discussion and discussion with you all about where you want to go with that. But just to remind you all, and I think Fred Pearson had come several times and gave us updates on where those values were. But at the end of the day, the value increased on all county property by an average of 48%. So our value of property currently is $6.2 billion. Before this reassessment, our value of property was at $4.5 billion, just to give you like where we were and where we are now. So at a 62-cent tax rate, which is where you currently are, we would be able to bring in $36.5 million, which is additional revenue of $10.1 million over what we budgeted last year. I know that's not where we want to be, so I just wanted to give you that's where we are based on our current rate. Any questions right now on revenue before we move on to expenditures?
I have one, Ms. Van Hyde.
Yes.
Has everything, you talking about Mr. Pearson, I know they working on the
Hearings.
building permits and everything. Has all of those been
Yes.
entered to the commissioner yet?
Yes, I believe everything is there. We have the book. They had to turn the book in as of January 1, and that should cover everything.
All the building permits for 23 has
Should.
been put, okay.
So all of that is in that figure. Now, there will be some adjustment to this because of the hearings that you have. Like, this is not a set in stone kind of
No.
figure. It is a fluid number.
Right.
But just so you know, it takes a lot of millions to make a dent. So, you know, if we're, you know, chopping off $300,000-400,000 of value, that's not the tax that we would earn. It amounts to pennies almost, tiny pennies, not pennies. But right now, based on that value, our per penny amount is $588,000. So that's roughly how much money you get per penny.
588.
$588,000.
Gotcha.
Ms. Van Hyde, quick
Yes.
question. Going back to the machinery and tool tax, I know we're probably, a little over $500,000 ahead of budget in terms of the revenue. Are there any major changes or surprises there that we need to be
Well,
aware of?
you've got some industry coming in, like Tyson's a big one.
Understand.
But just remember, our incentives are rebates.
I
So,
get it.
yeah, where it's there, it's really going out.
Okay,
So when they meet performance, and we don't send it back unless they meet performance. So sometimes it takes a year or two, but also if it's an industry that we share with the city of Danville, we have to budget to give them half of that money back. So that revenue's there, but there's kind of an offsetting expense for a lot of that, especially your new industry. So you really won't see excellent revenue in machinery and tools for these businesses that have landed until, one, the incentives have all been paid, and some of them are 5 years, 7 years. It just depends on what's been negotiated.
I understand. And that's why I asked the question, because I want all of my colleagues to understand that, you know, this is projected revenue. It's not what we really have.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct. That's just what we think we'll have at June 30, based on historical data and based on what's come in so far this year.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I
sir.
got a question. Ms. Van Hyne?
Yes.
Has the new Hughes Center, has that been on put on the books yet?
The new Hughes Center?
Yes, on 41.
I think that would be tax exempt. I don't think we get
We
real
don't get
estate
any revenue off of that?
I can check
I
on
guess
it
you
and
get a
see, but I'm
building, you have
pretty
a
sure.
building permit, but anything else generated off of that?
I don't think so,
Okay, that's-
but we can check. I'm
that
pretty
just
sure
opened
that's
up.
probably tax exempt property.
I didn't know if it was a 501(c)(3).
Mr. Arnold's coming to the desk to give us the answer.
I knew that.
We'll have to look into the Hughes Center's status as far as whether it's tax exempt or not, but I did want to just expound upon your earlier question, Chairman Dalton, in regards to have all the 2023 new construction building permits been entered into
Yes,
the
sir.
real estate database? I believe there are still some that Pearson's is working through, so I just want to clarify, and staff are working with Pearson's to get them in the system.
So
But
we might possibly have a little bit of
There
revenue
might be a
off of
little bit
that.
more, but I think to your point, Ms. Vanderhyde, it takes a boatload of,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
assessed
To-
value
to
to
move
equal,
it.
to
That's
to
right.
move the needle
Oh,
on the
yeah.
tax revenue
Right.
standpoint, so.
But every little bit helps.
Sure, but I just
Right.
wanted to,
So what comes in, you got hearings where most of those hearings, let's be honest, are things that's gonna come off your books, not
Mm-hmm.
things that's going on your books. I mean, nobody's gonna set up a hearing and say, hey, you undervalued my property.
Right.
Rarely would you have that, I don't think. So, it's a give and take, but
How
it
about
does
a-
take, you get excited, you think, oh, that's $500,000, but when you apply that tax rate per $100 of tax,
Right.
it's not a lot of tax, but it is some ins and outs, so,
How about,
thank you.
how about our tax relief, program? Didn't that end the 15th of February?
Yeah, for the
The people
deadline.
that is applicant for
Yes. Mm-hmm.
that? Okay. So we know what that is too?
I don't know it yet.
Okay, all
That's
right.
just some of the things
I mean,
that
that's got to come off, 'cause that's gonna be
still
relief,
need
yeah.
to know.
Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
gotcha. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to our operating budget, we're going to discuss primarily things that are located in your general fund. Your general fund is what is funded by the tax that I just spoke about, as well as other revenues that the county earns. And so, of course, we want that to be balanced 100%. So our budget request this year totaled $10 million more than last year's adopted general fund budget. So last year's budget was 79.8, and it's $89 million currently. We have worked on that, but I say currently is, right now, that's what we have as request. In that budget, there was a 3% COLA included for county employees under the county's pay plan. And we also have word that's beginning January 1st. That bill is still alive and well. Our minimum wage will go from $12 to $13.50. So the funding that is included in that $670,000, will cover that. If all employees are given a 3%, everyone will be above that $13.50 figure, except for your temporary part-time people, and we will move them from 12 to 13.50 January 1. Those are employees that don't work on a consistent basis. They're your gatekeepers at your basketball games and football games and things like that. That's the majority of them, but anybody that just comes in and works a particular season of the year, they're at minimum wage right now, which is $12. And we will only move them to the $13.50 January 1, not July 1.
Also, I think we're maybe looking at $1.50 more the following year to
January.
15.
Correct.
Yep.
So that's one of those budget challenges that
Yep.
you can't just lock in to a rate this year,
You got to look ahead.
but you have to bear in mind what's coming down the
Yep.
road. And that's a big one. The last time we had a big jump like that, the way we handled it, instead of giving, actually, we did $1.50 for every employee, for 2,080 hours if you're full-time, so it was a total of $3,120. So it was a much larger raise for people on the lower end of the scale. It only maybe 7 or 8 people that make more than 6 figures, and that's when you get to where it's 3% or less, when it's over that 6-figure salary. So it does help your lower paid people to get a much larger increase, but it costs about $1 million to do that.
Yep.
And that's, nothing, the 670 is nothing compared to that. So we felt like for this year, we could make it work if we did a 3%. So our request included for new positions total $746,000. We went over these briefly during our budget workshop, but I wanted to lay out where they are located. There is one help desk technician in information technology. There are 4 public safety positions that are being requested for $640,000. There is one recreation, that would be a youth sports coordinator. And then we have one community and policy management team position request, and that is for case manager. So they are the 7 positions that's currently in this budget request. There is one part-time position, and that's at the library, the Brosville Library to be more specific, because they don't have enough people for there to be adequate coverage if one needs to be away from that front desk, and it's for safety reasons that they're asking for that part-time position. And then we have 3 part-time positions that there's a request to make those full-time. It's one in the registrar's office for an assistant registrar to make them full-time, and then 2 911 dispatchers that are currently part-time, and they are requesting that they go full-time. And then what we've done, and I didn't go through every single one of these requests, but the very large ones that have lots of money, of course, we did meet with every single department head. We have gone through all of those expenses, and we've asked questions. We've actually gone back and asked for further justification for some of the funds that have been requested. But I'm going to go over the ones that have the major request so that you can see where those requests are. So the sheriff asked for an increase to overtime due to workforce shortage, and that total increase was $118,000. There is a new lease for 20 vehicles, and that started in FY24. So in the FY24 adopted budget, this did not exist. The first year, you all allow the sheriff to carry over funds for year 1. That contract does continue for the next 4 years, so we have to do the $214,000. Increases to the new SRO positions. If you'll remember, you all approved an SRO enhancement grant. What we opted to do at that time is to take our SRO current officers and put those in those positions so we could start drawing down that money. If not, it was going to take a while for us to find qualified SROs that could start in those positions, and we could not start drawing the money until they became certified. So we have those already existing SROs in the grant, but when we checked with DCJS, they said this is not a means to supplement what you already have. It is an enhancement grant. So therefore, we have to hire 10 new positions, which I'm thankful that the sheriff did think outside of the box, and we are hiring part-time SRO positions for those openings, and which is very good because we don't have to pay the retirement and that kind of thing. But we did offer them health insurance because most of them are retired officers that already have their certification. So as such, of course, we have to pay for all of that we have obligated ourselves to. So there are increases not only just for the salaries and benefits, but for ammunition, uniforms, so all those costs go up because now we've got 10 new people that we've got to outfit at a total cost of $162,000. Our increase for our local match to SRO and other grants, last year we asked the sheriff if he would take his carryover money so that we could take that money and use it for these matches, and that's what we did last year. This year it's in the budget so that this is a true cost. We can't always be dependent that there's going to be carryover to take care of that. So that's the sheriff. There are other minor increases, but nothing, these are the large ones in the sheriff's office. I will speak to, the jail is not part of this, but the sheriff did lose 4 emergency positions in the jail because of the census was down, and so the comp board has cut 4 emergency positions because they are not needed. So that has been eliminated from the budget. We're not going to keep it in if it's not something that's funded. And the sheriff agreed to that for sure. So fire and EMS, yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Mr. Bowman.
just for clarification, on the SROs, that increase for local match to SROs with other grants, you're saying 10. Are these going to be recurring each year, or
Yes.
is this just 1 year?
No. So right now, we have 10 full-time positions that are in that grant. That grant pays something like a starting salary of $47,000. Our SROs make, some of them make $60,000, $65,000. So not only do we have to pay the percentage that is required of us, so the first year, for 10 months, it was free money, which we
It's
had to
never
pay
free.
over and above the free money because they made more than that. Plus, now that we're in year 2, it goes by the local composite index, which drives many things, not just schools. So of course, last year it was 25% that we had to pay. This year it's 26.11%, that's the LCI. So that's based on the new LCI plus that additional money that has to go in the grant. This current FY24 budget already had those 10 part-times in it. So this, that's already baked into your budget, is those 10.
So they started out as part-time, right?
No, they never did.
All right,
So
so they're-
originally, when the grant came, it was for 10 full-time SROs.
Okay.
So the sheriff asked the DCJS, is it okay if we put our current SROs that we were paying local money for, can we take those and put them in the grant? They agreed to that, but they said you still have to hire 10
Full-time.
because it's an enhancement. They didn't say it had to be full-time.
Oh,
So the
okay.
sheriff thought outside the box and said, we'll do part-time. So really, there was local money already for 10. Got me? That we were paying for. And now this is a new 10, but they're part-time. So it should help us, but as time goes on, eventually the 10 full-times that are grant-funded will become ours. It's just inching up.
And how about the part-time?
The part-time's already ours.
But they won't be full-time.
They won't be full-time.
There's no guarantees there either.
No, they could come back and say that's not working for us, but the part-times for the most part are in smaller elementary school settings.
Right.
So, which makes sense. And, I thought that was pretty smart of him, and they only work the school year.
Okay. All right, good, thank you.
So under fire and EMS, their request was quite a bit more than last year. I think it was $1.2 million more, just like the sheriff's was $1.2 million more. And I wanted to point out some of those things they've asked for. They wanted an increase to the matrix that we utilize to give them funding, and that was $184,000 more than last year. The EMS supplement per call, it increased. They were requesting an increase from $25 a call to $50 a call, and that's a total increase of $205,000. Fire response, we've never paid a per call for fire response. This was a brand new request from them, so that would be an increase of $60,000. So it would cost us $60,000 for this year one. Equipment maintenance on EMS equipment, that request, we've never done that before either, was $212,000. Some of the equipment we don't think is being maintained. That is a requirement of insurance that the equipment is checked and you verify that it is up to standard. And then the last one is the equipment maintenance for fire equipment, and that was $179,000. And that also was a new request. Any questions on fire and E EMS?
Kim, the fire response per call, tell us a little bit about that. What are they asking for?
Pretty much the same thing that EMS gets, so they get a per call amount from us, so we'll take that, however many calls that is, for each agency and multiply it by that dollar figure
So
to
they have
give them an allotment.
So they have an idea of how many according to past history, to
Well,
know
we
what to
have-
ask for?
Well, actually, it's the actual calls that
Okay.
went, that we have through dispatch.
Okay,
So that's how that figure, and I guess they derived it from historical figures.
okay. Is that like $50 a call then, just like EMS, or, I know EMS went from 25 to 50.
I'm assuming it was at 50, I can't remember. It was 15? We'll confirm that.
Okay.
I should have brought that with me.
Yeah,
Ms. Vanderhout, I think we're currently paying $25 a call, and they're asking for an additional $50 a call in
No,
this
they
budget.
want to increase it to 50
250.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
They're
EMS.
asking
from
for-
25.
Correct.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I was saying.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
More per call.
Yep. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ing.
Kim, we have approved this fire and rescue study, and part of that was funding and just a whole kit and caboodle. I'm concerned to see that you're putting in here 4 full-time public safety positions in addition to what we already have. Isn't that a little premature, and how was this justified?
This was based on information from Mr. Key for the 640 area. We talked about that at length, that there's not a full ambulance service there. We contract with Halifax County. They provide, backup for us, and then, if they can't come, we're sending one of our agencies from Mount Herman or somewhere that's further away. And right now, that is just strictly first responders. So we currently have 2 paid staff there that are first responders. So basically, they work 12-hour shifts, and they would go out as first responder, of course, if they're there. And that would eliminate it would be a full ambulance service. And so we would not need, the backup from Halifax any longer if we had that ambulance service. And that is to do, 24/7 coverage. So it takes 4 more paramedics to do that.
Okay.
Sure, come on.
Right now, the ambulance service for that area in the northeast, looking at it seriously, would come from Gretna and Chatham, and I think it's more efficient. I don't think that's as efficient as that standard could be. I think it would be improved. I've heard the FRC talk about the northeast quadrant needing more attention. It's not just 640. It's to deliver a more efficient ambulance response to that area, that quadrant. Also, I think they could have some fire, 2 of the positions I think are fire EMT, and could do fire backup for that area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dalton.
Is that 2 paramedics per shift, 3 8-hour shifts is
It's
what
3
we're trying?
shifts and
we're
2
trying to
on each.
establish
So you've got an advanced and a basic,
on
and they're
each?
all all considered firefighter EMTs now. So all of them would have that designation.
So we could use the 2 that's there and get an additional 4 more
4.
to run 3 shifts, 8 hours a shift around
No,
the clock.
they work 24-hour shifts.
Shifts.
And so I don't know exactly how it works, but it's 1 or 2 days on, and then you're off so many days. But our regular EMTs that we have working now, they're all on 24-hour shifts, except for those first responders
Okay.
that work 12-hour shifts.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Any other fire and rescue? So schools, this is a big one, and, you know, of course, schools were here to talk to you all. This is not something that's over yet. You know, we just got word, I think I saw something yesterday, that there's now a House and Senate version. They're $1 billion apart, $1 billion apart. I mean, it's big, it's big. They're not anywhere close to being on the same page of music. So this could possibly change. The governor's budget is the one that would benefit us the best. That means he doesn't have anything in for salaries for teachers or anything like this. This is our best case scenario. So right now, based on what is in his proposed budget, that local required effort requires us to give $800,000 right now more than what we gave schools last year. The schools, just so you know, have not asked for this money. It's just preparing us to make sure we can cover what's coming. So based on what we did last year, we gave 6% over that local required effort, which still is very fluid. It's moving. So right now, there's $2,175,000 in this budget, but that will most likely increase if they decide something other than the governor's budget. So that's a big wallop that I don't think you can do much with unless you go back to the bottom. And I don't know how that would fare, because like tonight you all have a public hearing to approve $5.9 million for schools. That's state money. All of that has a match. If you were at the bottom, it would be coming with another ask from the locality. You must add X number of dollars in order for you to get this $5.9 million. So if you don't prepare for it, you would be short. And just so you know, that's going to continue to escalate year over year over year as things move, as things change. And just so you know, that formula that determines that is 2 years old. That's based on property values from 2 years ago. Just think what it's going to be when we fast forward and we got a 48% increase. What is that going to do to us? It's a lot that goes into that formula. They showed you a whole slide that showed you how they derived that. And they are looking at a funding formula change that we have heard will not benefit us financially. It'll make it even worse. So the last thing that is a really big piece of the general fund budget is the capital contribution. And I did hand you a capital, and we're going to segue into that. But that contribution right now, after we've sliced a little bit off that we think as staff that need to be in there, we're looking at roughly 4.5, but we started at 5. So your sheet shows like $5,083,000, and we'll talk about the things that have been cut out of that already. Any questions on those two items before we move on to capital? So our capital budget, and it's a lot of words up there, but we'll go over them at a very high level, and please stop and ask questions if you have them. There is $136,500 that is in there for 3 items. Specifically, it's for an onboarding program for human resources to be able to get our employees set up and paid properly. A telephone upgrade that would require, right now, if our server goes down, we lose phones, we lose everything, and it's basically putting our phones in the cloud per se. So we should not have that break in coverage when our servers are down. And then finally, there is software through Keystone that allows us to have an online portal for building permits. That has been a lasting problem for us, where if you're in the Stanton River District and you need to get a building permit, you got to drive all the way to Chatham. This is going to allow for people to actually do that through the online portal and do business a little bit smoother and maybe with a lot less travel. Building and grounds capital totaled $440,000. Building and grounds has a fund that they use for emergency purchases. We have been funding that for the last couple of years with some CARES and ARPA funding that got freed up from the general fund. That pot is dwindling, and so they want to increase that to $340,000, and that's if HVAC goes out all of a sudden. You have a major repair that needs to happen. That's usually where we go to get the funding for that. Space needs study is $100,000, and we have eliminated that. We feel like that's something staff could do on our own. Then fire and rescue. So the first part I talked to you about was operating for fire and rescue. The second part deals with the capital piece of that. So apparatus increases for volunteer and fire and rescue. So they had asked for $50,000 more per vehicle. So right now for fire trucks, we provide $200,000 per fire truck. So that's $400,000 a year because we fund 2 a year. And that is made by a recommendation by the Fire and Rescue Association. They keep up with the rotation of that and who is next in line to get that funding. So that would go from $200,000 to $250,000. The ambulances would increase from $125 to $175. We also fund 2 of those a year. So that's $50,000 basically for all of those increases there. And then, of course, there was an item in there to purchase an EMS building in Blair's for $680, that should say $1,000, and we have eliminated that as staff. There is money in there for that drug box requirement that you all have heard much about, $70,000. There is a career ambulance primarily for the 640 area if we do move that to an ambulance situation. If we do not do 640, that ambulance is still very much needed because our career ambulances, some of them are in poor shape.
Yes.
And they don't really have a good backup if something happens. And then radio upgrade of $180,000, and that is year 2 of a 3-year upgrade, and that's to upgrade the volunteer radios because they're out of warranty, you can't find parts to fix them and that kind of thing. And so on your capital sheet, if you were to look at that, you will see we've made some changes to our fire and rescue. Some of the things that we could possibly do is instead of maybe doing $50,000 a vehicle for fire and for rescue, we could maybe just do 25 to give them some bump there. And of course, we have eliminated that $680,000 amount. The next section we call departmental or community capital outlay needs.
Ms. Vander,
Yes,
someone had
yes. Somebody has a question?
Mr. Dalton, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay,
That's the 680s for the old Commonwealth radio building?
yes, and we
Yeah.
already cut
Don't
that
nobody
out.
need- We don't need that.
No,
Okay.
we already cut that.
It's right there at Blythe.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
so
thank you.
question on your capital funds right here. This
Yes.
is based on 59 cents versus 62 cents, right?
Right, we kind of started based on some, what we were hearing from you all to try to start cutting some things out. So
Okay.
there are definitely things that we are cutting.
So this is under a proposed 59-cent tax rate.
Yep, we've
that
gotten
correct?
it to that, but we'll go over that in a little bit greater detail.
Okay.
I did.
Shave it down.
We should be working on 62. That's what we got. I should be working on 42. I mean, don't we need to be working off of 62? That's what we got today. We hadn't really set the rates yet.
No, you
No.
have not set the
No.
rate, but we know that's a lot.
Yeah, but we need to be working off of what we know we're gonna have, based at 62 cents, right?
Based on 62 cent, right now,
Before
you could
reassessment.
fund this whole budget if you wanted to. If you wanted to keep the rate at 62 cent, you could keep it at 62 cent.
No, I'm just talking about keeping it like it, not moving it to 62. We'd have to go back to 42 to get it based off of what the reassessment's got.
And you can't do that.
That's revenue
Yeah,
neutral.
that's what I'm saying.
You can't do it.
That's I know, that's what I'm saying, though.
That
You
would
can't
be a
do that.
nightmare.
But what I'm saying is,
But if
your
you,
departments that request things, they don't look at 62 cent. They
Right.
look at, this is what I need.
Yep.
Right.
When you were at Building and Grounds, did you say, now what's this rate gonna do? Or did you ask for what you needed? This is just what people need. That's all
Right.
I'm giving to you right now.
That's right.
What they need,
I-
regardless of what we gonna have
Right.
to do the need.
a lot of them ask for what they want. I always
Wish
asked for
list.
what I needed, and I most time didn't get what I needed.
True,
Yeah,
yep.
I didn't ask for wants.
Mr. Ingram.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably going to be a very bold statement, but who ultimately makes the decision on hiring new personnel, new positions, et cetera? That's one question. And another is, when we are confronted with such a terrible deficit by way of our budget and not wanting to raise taxes, Darrell and I the chairman and I brought this up a couple of years ago, to freeze all new hiring. So is that not a possibility that we could look at to help us until we?
Absolutely. I mean, y'all are the law ones that set what you want to do. But just so you know, Mr. Terrell is your HR person. That's who you gave the authority. So anything job-related or anything like that, if he sees that there's a need, he could add it. Can that change? Yes, I mean, it could change. So you all could make a pronouncement, we don't want any new hires, you could do that.
I
We
did-
are asking for additional justifications for all of those positions. So,
I did say it was a bold statement, and I surely don't want to cut anybody short, but, sometimes I think we collectively look at our government is getting too top-heavy. And I think to a certain degree, we're getting there, and I think we need to be very careful. It's like we're hiring a supervisor to help the supervisor help the supervisor, and I think we can do a better job. And a lot of these positions that are allocated, it's new to us. We get the board update every Friday, and it's like, my goodness, how are we going to pay all these salaries? So I just think collectively, and this probably comes back to personnel, is that maybe we need to step back and take a stronger look at what we're approving and hoping to allocate as far as our budget and future budgets.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Ingram, so you know that the Finance Committee, we're going to work through all of and this right now is just basically a wish list from different departments saying they need this. So we don't want to, in this meeting, paint with too broad a brush because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't necessarily freeze hiring when.
Depends on what the baby looks like. Well taken, sir. Thank you.
All babies are pretty until they look like their mom and dad. But 640 Rescue, we certainly need that type of service down in that quadrant to be able to take care of because that's
Yes, sir.
really, really remote. Okay, so we're going to look at that and we're going to vet this whole thing. I'm sorry, Ms. Van Hyde.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kim.
so moving on to the department community capital outlay totals, and that's $2.2 million total. The big piece of that is the Moses Building renovations, the Amoresco contract that you all approved back in December. That was at a cost of $1.5 million. Tonight, you all will be passing a reimbursement resolution in case you decide to borrow funds, and we're not borrowing funds anytime in the near future until interest rates come down, but it's just to protect yourself. And just so you know, you have the capacity of about $700,000 of debt money that will help fund this in year one. And we'll go over that. We don't have very much time, but I definitely want to go over how that debt and paying it into a project fund would work. The other piece and the most of the rest of that piece comes from the fact that we do not have to budget for reassessment again this coming year. And so, that was an 87% decrease because we're not having to budget $730,000 thereabouts. So all of that is on your expenditure summaries that I provided for you all. And so in addition to that, there was $300,000 for a comprehensive plan upgrade. We are cutting that back to $150,000 because we believe we can find grants to possibly fund the remainder. Voting equipment purchase, the total in there is $375,000. The plan is to cut that in half as well, and hopefully we'll be able to get state funding to help offset some of that cost, but that is over a 2-year period. The bookmobile, their bookmobile is over 10 years old, and that is something that the librarian has met with us, Rhonda, and hopefully with the $100,000 seed money, she'll be able to get grants and raise money for the rest of the purchase of that. So I think her original request was $200,000, so that's been cut back as well. So under recreation, there's $40,000 in the recreation capital outlay, and that is for a tractor at Wayside Park. That's $25,000. And then every year we put $15,000 in for the facility lease at our schools, and that's to be able to utilize the gyms for basketball and that kind of thing. With them introducing middle school sports, it may be in the future that we won't have the availability that we've had in the past, and we may have to take these funds and utilize those for renting of different properties where these kids can go and practice. But that's all of your capital. Any questions on that? You do have an outline sheet that has every bit of that information, and definitely will get you some questions answered if you need those. This is just a little snippet on long-term capital needs that we went over during our budget workshop. But some of the things coming down the road that we need to be aware of is the critical county facility improvements that we have. Lots of things, HVACs, that need to be replaced. We've got a possibility of needing about $5 million. Our broadband project, we will have to fund $4.5 million that we knew from the very get-go. That's going to have to be borrowed as this project comes to an end. Our dam project, and that's just an estimate, we don't know, but we're looking at maybe $5 million. And these start anywhere from the end of this year to 2034. So this is kind of a long-term capital need outlook. So you've got your jail project that's at $62 million, courthouse project at $100 million, and that recreation center that's way out there in the future, that may be something that we would look at, but not necessarily set in stone. So they're just some of our future needs, capital needs. So this is how our debt service looks right now. So currently we have a modest amount of debt that's outstanding. We did have Christy go back. I think Daryl had recommended her going back to see, do we have anything we could refinance or maybe pay off or whatever. They are not recommending us paying off our debt because we're down to the end of our debt. And we have excellent interest rates. And interest rates right now are at an all-time high. What they recommend that we do is debt as it falls off, that it would actually go into a project fund, an escrow account that would help fund some of these projects we have on that long-term capital list without borrowing funds in the future. So right now in '24, we budgeted $8.4 million. Next year that's going to about $7.5 million. So you have a delta there that this year we're going to use for the Moses building. But in the coming years, you can see how that debt falls off. All of that delta will stay in that escrow account until our debt payments start. So at the very beginning of our jail project, we should have funds to cover debt service for maybe a year before that full $3.5 million hits us. So that's coming in just a very short order. So we wanted you all to be aware of that because it's not just looking at this in a silo, FY 2025. So just bear that in mind. Do you have any questions over what I've gone over? I think we've got about 5 minutes before our next meeting. So I'm going to invite Mr. Terrell to come back up, and I can certainly be here if you have questions.
Thank you, Ms. Van der Heydt. Mr. Terrell.
slide, please. Okay, given everything that you've heard, many needs, we're trying to pare them down to what's realistic and think forward, not just today, but what this county is going to need to be successful. We're talking about things happen at the mega site. Things are happening. There will be growth here. We've got to offer some things like recreation. We've got to make sure our buildings are maintained. We are the best county in Virginia, but we can be even better. We do recommend lowering the tax rate, given this 48% increase in property values. We want to offer some tax relief. We understand that that is necessary. We can do this at 59 cents. This rate would allow us to cover current budgetary needs for the upcoming year, and will allow for some growth, as Ms. Vanderhyde just explained, with the debt situation and the long-term capital projects, which are significant, coming down the road, and allow us to build up a debt reserve fund. We can do this at a 59-cent rate to offer some tax rate relief. Now, let's be transparent. We're not hiding anything. These needs are critical, but a typical single-family residence with a current property value of $200,000, based on the 48% average that we're seeing in the property values, that increase on the $200,000 single-family house would now be $296,000, using the 48% average in tax base. So let's be transparent. The effect of a tax rate at 59 cents would be an additional $506.40, about $42 a month. Now recall that 1 cent of taxes is $588,000. So the things that we've discussed to reduce the tax rate further would require reductions approximating that amount for each 1 cent you would want to reduce if you wanted to go further than that. Okay? So, any comments or thoughts for myself or Ms. Vanderhyde?
Mr. Bowman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Real quick, what thought has staff put into those folks that are at the poverty level? I'll just use that. Because of this increase, is there anything in place to help them in paying their taxes? This is a big, burden on a lot of people. Everybody sitting at this dais up here pays taxes. It's a big increase for everybody. So I want to know at that level there, what concessions, what plan, what can we do as a board, as a county, to take care of those folks that cannot pay?
Yeah. Well, that's a thought that's preeminent in
Mr. Terrell, excuse me, we're almost out of town. Mr. Bowman, to your point, we recognize it, but that's kind of a rhetorical question at this juncture. Mr. Ingram. Mr. Ingram, did you have your hand up?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Good.
Thank you. I have nothing. I'm good.
Okay. You're done, Mr. Terrell.
Yes, sir. So, my final thought, and to answer your question generally, is we are very mindful of the property value increase and the need to adjust the rate, because not everybody is wealthy, and we understand that. This budget, we've tried to pare down to exactly what we can do to be a lean organization that does what the citizens want, with fire rescue, sheriff, parks and recreation, because these people you talk about at low income need police protection. They need sufficient fire rescue. They need parks and recreation. They need that too. And my answer is, we understand that burden, but we're trying to get this to what they expect of us at the most lean and efficient level. So there are other programs through Commissioner Revenue as to relief, but it is what it is. If we want to be a leader and best community, and we are and can be better. This is what staff thinks it's going to take, but not just today, over the next 4 years. Now, that's my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell, and thank you, Ms. Van Hyde. Did you have anything else? Let me say this before we close, and I'll, being chair of the Finance Committee, and to Mr. Bowman's point, and just to kind of hitchhike on Ms. Van Hyde and also Mr. Terrell's coattails there, I think, most of the board, I've kind of polled the board, and everyone seems to be wanting to coalesce around 59 cents in terms of setting this tax rate. But in saying that, we are in no way insensitive to the fact that, our citizens are going to experience some pain. But at the same time, we started off this meeting talking about striking a balance in terms of what is essential and what's necessary to be able to provide the services that, our constituents want in this county. And also, we have to keep in mind, everyone's mentioning economic development. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When that happens, typically part of what we offer are some of the abatements to these companies, and then, it's really going to kind of dig into the county's coffers for the first, 8-10 years before we really see any realistic revenue come in our direction. So we have to keep all of that in mind, and I want to share with everyone in Pennsylvania County, we are very, guarded in terms of how we spend your hard-earned tax dollars. So it has to make sense. Anything else?
No, sir. I'm good.
Nothing else? We're adjourned.